I should start off and say welcome. This is for the Tech Marketers Group. And I am Helen Shorthouse, and I will share my screen in 2 seconds. Right, so hopefully you are all in the right place. We are here about talking to your customers, and I want to make it pretty practical and hands-on. So as I said, chip in if you've got any questions. I'm on my screen, so I can't necessarily see, so shout or get Lisa to holler and I'll stop, because I'm only working off one screen at the moment. So who am I? I'm Helen, and I work as a CMO on a fractional basis for lots of different companies. And I always describe my essence as being to provide strategy, tools, and the practical application. But it's really about helping tech businesses grow effectively and shine their brilliance to their worlds, because I know there's awesome businesses across New Zealand, and sometimes they just need a little bit of shaping, helping, supporting, and they can take their brilliance to their world, whatever that is. I tend to be very focused on strategic leadership, but I also help people take practical action. And so that is what today is all about. So I am just going to cover off why we should talk to our customers, or if you already know the answer, but you're really struggling to persuade other people in your organization why that is important, then hopefully some of the things I've got included in here will help for that as well. I think it's important to acknowledge our blockers as well, because sometimes I think the reality is that although we know we want to do it and we will do it one day, there are some blockers. Sometimes they're external to us, but sometimes they're inherent in ourselves as well. So I think if we can understand and acknowledge those, then that's a good step forward. And then I'm going to talk about the how-tos, and that includes different there are different reasons why you would talk to your customers at different times. And then hopefully we'll get into some practical tips, and you will have a freebie at the end, which I will talk about. Right, wrong way. Is there anything else that anybody thinks, I've not got that covered off? I really wanted to cover this off. All right, get rid of my loom. If not, we'll carry on. So I can't see everybody, but when was the last time you actually talked to your customers? I guess I would kind of quite like you to think about that. And if anybody wants to be brave enough and shout out, when was the last time they actually talked to their customers? I'm not talking about in your day-to-day practical task of how you actually talk to customers to sell to them or to answer questions that they have. When was the last time you actually talked to them to find out about what they wanted and what their needs were? Has anybody done it recently?
I spoke to one of our customers a few months ago because I was trying to film like a little interview for a case study video, which was quite nice. And the only way to sort of con them into it was to have a beer first and then do the interview afterwards.
Beer bribery often works. That's awesome. Francel's just said she does regular win-loss calls on a fortnightly basis, so that's brilliant. Anybody else want to share? Last month? Yeah, great. I mean, I'm assuming that we're all here because we kind of acknowledge it's something we should probably do more often. And I think the reality is that certainly with some of the organisations I come across, it's kind of there seems to be a blocker, and we don't do it quite as often as we should do, or not in the way that we think we should do. So sometimes we do talk to people, but for a different reason. And that's kind of what this is all about. So often we don't talk to our customers, and that can have impacts for the business. So I don't know whether any of these sound familiar at all for your organisation, but many tech businesses in New Zealand struggle with launching products that haven't been properly validated. They kind of create a product and then take it to market. Businesses struggle to get funding, or they might miss opportunities and nuances as the market changes. I've had conversations with people who see competitors gaining market share, or who comment that customers just don't seem to get what it is that we're trying to do. So this isn't kind of fantasy land. These are genuine things that happen in New Zealand businesses, and I suspect that some of you are probably working for organisations that have also struggled with some of these issues as well. If we were close, this is my hypothesis, if we were close to our customers and prospects, many of these issues wouldn't exist, because we'd know about them. Instead, we'd have a strong pipeline. We'd be the go-to offering in the market. We'd have prospects flooding it in, looking for us. We'd have references coming out of our ears with our customers telling everybody else about it, and we'd see market trends coming in the future because we'd be really close to our customers. And that's kind of nirvana, right? But who of us are actually achieving that at the moment? Maybe not. So my essence is get out, go and talk to people. The idea of Sophie, you saying the big thing, that works, that's brilliant. Sometimes we don't necessarily always have the opportunity to do that, particularly if we're based remotely from where our customers are. But hypothetically, taking a beer or a coffee or something with customers is a great way of doing it. So, as I said, I sometimes think that there are blockers that stop us, and I certainly know some of the conversations I've had with businesses have shown that there are blockers. And so some of these are, I would say that sometimes people don't necessarily understand exactly how vital it is, and some of that might be related to the fact that they've already done it. So I think some organisations do a really good job of talking to customers or prospects, but they do it once and then forget to kind of go back and do that again. So they might have done it when they were building the product, but actually have moved on quite a long way from that and aren't doing it on a regular basis. I think one of the other things is that while we all know that talking to customers is a really important thing to do, it's not one of those urgent things. Everything else seems urgent, and yet it's probably one of the most important things that we can actually do. But because the customer's not ringing us, and there are 10 other tasks on our list, we quite often don't get to do it. I've definitely had conversations with people who just are frankly scared. They don't want the negative feedback. They think customers may give them, so that's exposing themselves. This is particularly if you've got a founder, or there's, the person who's developed the product. Doesn't necessarily want to hear the negative feedback. Sometimes have conversations with people who say, yeah, I'm talking to customers all the time, but the reality is they're talking to customers. They're not necessarily listening to customers or asking questions about what's going on in the customer's world. And then the other one is that simply that, yeah, sure, I need to do it, but I don't really know where to start or what to say or whether the customer will want to talk to me. So is there anything else there that I've missed? Is there anything from you guys that you think, oh gosh, actually, when I think about it, either for myself or I see other people within my team struggling with?
For me, I'll just jump in again. I feel like I feel like I need to give them something valuable in exchange for their time, because it sort of feels like I'm taking from them as the customer, and that's kind of something that I sort of struggle with, like what to give them in return. Sort of.
Yeah. Anything from anybody else?
I'd also say sales owning the relationship over marketing, so struggling to get access to them.
Yeah, great. And sorry, Franchelle, you put something in there as well.
Just to follow on from Corin's point, sales owning the relationship, and then when you try to get access to the customer through sales, often you get that sales lens applied to the information that the customer's, communicating, which makes it really challenging to get an unobstructed view.
Yeah.
Or an unfiltered view. Yeah.
There is, to counter that too, there is value in riding along with salespeople when they are in communication with or they're meeting with a customer, because then you get to hear the dialogue and any objections that happen in that sales conversation, which as a marketer, we can circumnavigate potentially for them. So I think, there is value in also riding along with the sales team and hearing that dialogue.
Yeah, I think if you leave it to your salesperson, or if you leave your customer insights to kind of get fed to you through your sales organization, absolutely, that then presents another series of biases and challenges. But riding along is an awesome way to find out what's really going on. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. So just before I get into the nuts and bolts of it, so this is possibly helpful more if you're trying to persuade other people why we should do it, but it's also kind of a sense check as to, is this worth my time when I've got 10 other things on my desk that I need to be doing? So there is bucket loads of evidence. I've just pulled a few key points here, but it's the second highest cause of failures for startups is the fact that they haven't actually found a market need. Customers who think that they're trying to get, put my teeth back in there. Customers who are seeing that the content from a supplier is actually tailored to their needs, and that could be through language or visuals or actually just the product itself, are much more likely to buy. Even having customer personas leads to higher quality leads, shorter sales cycles, and cheaper cost acquisition. And a load of customers actually leave without even telling us. So I was thinking about how I communicate with companies that I deal with. I think that stat is probably not surprising, that most of us just kind of walk away rather than communicate with customers. So you might never know that your customers are leaving you. And certainly I have worked for an organization once that actually had no idea that they had such an attrition rate because they didn't ever talk to their customers. So I think some of those are quite good sense checks to be able to go and say, actually, this is really important. There's a bottom line to this. And the reality is, if you actually really understand how you bring value to your customers, you build the right product and sell it at the right place to the right people in the right way, they're going to stay longer with you. They're going to buy more, and it's an easier kind of sales cycle to help them. So loads and loads of reasons. And then, so it really depends on what you're looking for. There are different times in a business's cycle that you might be talking to customers. And so I've just kind of pulled together some generics here. But so the questions that you ask will depend very much on what stage you're at. So it could be anything from product development, which is kind of, have we actually got a product or a solution in the marketplace? So that's really about trying to, not to say, here's my product. It's about saying, what are the things that are keeping you awake at night? You might have a product already, but you want to do some testing. The one that obviously is relevant to most of us here at the moment is around marketing. How do you reach your target audience effectively and get feedback from them? And what happens if you're going into a new market? What does that look like that's different? What is the new market? Why have we chosen the new market? Is there actually any scale in the new market? So there's lots of different questions that you might have under each of those. And then no surprises if I say to you, this is really about, it's really about listening. It's not about talking to your customers at all. It's a bit of a misnomer, but it's about listening to your customers. And there is a huge difference. And it's actually a really hard skill to have, to actually stop and listen. think we all tend to say, here's my product, or I've got an idea, or I'm looking for feedback. Whereas actually the reality is, in a lot of these cases, what you're trying to do is to actually hear what's going on in the customer's world, and actually to understand what their challenges are. And I think that speaks to the discussion we just had a second ago around going and seeing things through the sales lens. Your salespeople are there to sell a product that you've already got. And so actually it's quite a different mindset. So them having conversations, they can bring back rich data, but they are generally measured and targeted on doing a different task. So I think one of the things for marketing is to try and get people to think and understand about the value of the customer insight that we bring back to the table, which is quite different from the general conversations that might be happening, and they might be blinding us to why we are actually why we should be talking to our customers. And so some of the things to think about are, what are the key issues that are being discussed in that marketplace? What are the people who you think your target audience are? What are they talking about? What are their problems? Which ones are getting the most engagement? What's the terminology that they're using? Because it might be slightly different from the one that you've been talking about in-house. What solutions are they using at the moment? And the one I really like is, what are the workarounds that people are using? Because quite often we sit there and we say, oh, our competitor is X. But the reality is that sometimes the competitor might be doing nothing, or a spreadsheet, or there could be all sorts of workarounds that people have got, which are, they know if you talk to them, they're not ideal, but they're not that much of a pain point that shifts them to actually looking to do something else. So if you can understand all of those, it's not just saying, what are you using at the moment as an alternative offering? So these are some of the things to think about when you're going out to talk to your customers. So I was just going to jump through I bucketed these into 4 different things. I'm going to start gently by saying there's a whole heap of stuff that you can do to understand customers by sitting at your desk, but it shouldn't ever replace getting out of the office and talking to your customers. So there's loads of stuff available that we can do that you can really get quite a good understanding of what your target segment is really after. So obviously things like news articles and online groups. If you already do customer feedback, then that can bring you masses of really good data, and the Net Promoter Score is a real easy, basic one. And I always say it's not just the number for that one, it's actually the feedback and the data that you've got in the feedback survey. But even if you've got a customer support team, going and sitting alongside them, that is really helpful in listening to what customers are saying and talking to them about what the trends are that they're coming back with. The other thing I quite like doing is having a look at what competitors are talking about. Look at the good ones, not the bad ones, but the good ones will be certainly quite active in the marketplace, and look at how they're actually referring to things on their website and in their content marketing. How are they active in these news groups, these forums, etc. And then the other thing is, when you've done that, is actually have a look at your own marketing activity, whether it's your website or your sales tools, etc., and just try and have a look from a customer's perspective. It is quite hard because you always come with a bit of bias once you've joined an organization. But if you can see what you think your customers might see, who are, once you've gathered the data that you've gathered from previously, and are we answering those questions? Are we talking in that language? I think that can be quite useful to do as an exercise as well. I'm going to jump on to the next one, but before I do that, has anybody got anything else to add from what you can actually do from your desk? What works for you guys? What have you tried? What doesn't work?
I think another thing to do is just add some listening tools, or listen to social media to see what your customers are posting on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or wherever, because that's a really interesting way to see how they're positioning themselves in the market.
Yeah, great. That's a great idea.
I think another one that's sort of somewhere in between desk research and field work is if you have a software or a website that's really important, look into tools that record visitors on your site, and then you can look at how they've actually interacted with your website or your software, because it's, you know, they tell you one thing, but it's different to actually see them engage with it. So I've learned a lot from that in the past.
Yeah, so intent tooling like 6sense or tools like that are really interesting to see. In fact, they're now getting really clever, and they can see if the person's in your database, they actually bubble up the person that was looking at what page on your website. So those intent tools are really interesting.
Crazy.
Cool. Anything else from anybody else, or I'll jump on? Cool. And then this is one that I also really like using quite a lot, is that whole kind of play where they play. So it's all very well for you to sit at your desk, but the reality is it's if you can get out and meet customers in an informal setting, join industry groups, and some of this could be online or offline, but actually getting your headspace into where they are operating. So you might be targeting CIOs. So what is a CIO? Where do they get their information from? Where are they going? Where are they hanging out? What publications are they reading? What industry events are they going to? And don't even just look at the ones in New Zealand, look at global groups, especially if you're a globally operating organization. But the more you can kind of get out and about and meet these people and have that face-to-face with them, and also if you can engage with them as well. So kind of phase one is probably just like look at what they're doing, but as you start actually understanding what their challenges are, you can start engaging with them and possibly even asking questions or posing suggestions for them. And that, I think, is also really helpful. And that takes you into the place where they're actually operating quite far removed from I'm here to sell a product or a service. So this is really about you being helpful if you engage with them. But it's also about listening to what those individuals are actually talking about. Does anybody want to add anything on that? Move on. And then this one we've touched on a wee bit already. So it's that sitting alongside. And I kind of like to define this as passive or active here. So you've got opportunities with your sales team, with your customer success team and your product team, all of whom should be interacting with customers on a fairly regular basis, either in person or online. And sometimes just sitting alongside and listening is actually really helpful. But sometimes you might also want to be part of the conversation and either provide some questions to be asked while you sit to the side, but your colleague asks a question, or you jump in for that particular piece and say, ask the question of the customer. So I think the thing to say is the customer needs to know you're there. You can't just sit off the screen. If you're not going to tell the customer, you just need to listen to recordings. You shouldn't be, I don't believe, sitting alongside without communicating with the customer. But there is, you can say, I'm here to listen, or I'm here to learn. You can say, I will ask you a question, or I'm just observing. So just be clear. And then one of the things, obviously, Corinne and Caro talked about was the blocker for the salesperson. So sometimes the sales team can be quite defensive of their client, their contact, their account. And there's some good reasons for that. They have been tasked with bringing on board revenue for the business. And what they don't want is you jeopardizing the conversations they've been having with this individual from, in some cases, months and months and months. And they've carefully nurtured them. Why the hell do they want somebody from marketing who they would perceive as a loose cannon coming in? I would say that a big part of this is actually building trust and a relationship with your sales team over a period of time. And in some respects, it might take you some time to actually get to have a conversation with a customer. But if you invest the time in that sales team or sales individual, I think one of the things is to start understanding what measures they have, what are they trying to achieve, how can you working together help them to achieve their goal, what can you give back. Sophie, you talked about asking without feeling like you can give something, but from the same is for your internal team as well. How can your greater understanding help them to do their job? Do you develop sales tools? Are they having to spend their time all the time creating sales tools? Is it the fact that as a team you've been tasked with growing a particular market sector, and you empathize with them for the fact that they're always out and about having to kind of find new customers themselves? So is one of the things you can do to work together to actually identify leads and do some targeted activities that help to support them. So I think the same it's the same as having your ideal customer persona that's an external. Think about your sales team or your customer success or product teams as your internal customers, and do a little bit of a mini profile for them and what it is that would persuade them to allow you to work together. So I think it's really about trying to refocus people on the purpose of what they're trying to achieve and where you can have some shared goals and what the purpose is for the organisation. Anybody got any other comments on that particular section? Because obviously this is a biggie for people in terms of blocker sometimes. Has anybody got anything that's worked particularly well in terms of enabling them to go out with the salesperson?
I've actually got something to add.
Yeah.
So there are actually sometimes opportunities to help the customer with their marketing, and I don't mean their external go-to-market marketing, but sometimes the internal marketing. So an example of that is with a customer of ours. They were launching a new product, and we were helping them with building that product as an organization, but they were wanting to do this in sort of internal promotion. So we helped by creating some cool t-shirts, and the project team had these t-shirts. So there was like this internal marketing, internal branding activity that we were able to go in and add value to your point, Sophie, go in and add some extra value, but then get really great insights out of that engagement by understanding a little bit more about why they chose to work with us, and they became a really great case study. So, we got really great value out of that as well. So sometimes there's a bit of quid pro quo and, helping them with a project or some marketing or something that they're doing as well.
Yeah, that's great.
It's a nice, easy way for marketing to get involved with in an easy way.
Yeah, nice. And then going back to Sophie's idea of beers with the customer, if that was what it was to persuade the customer, go out for beers or coffee with your salespeople or your product people. See if you can, even if once a quarter, get together as a team socially. Because sometimes it's actually about breaking down barriers as well and getting to know the individual people, and then realizing that you're actually all about achieving the same things. And then just through those casual conversations, you can uncover ideas like Caroline said about trying to find ways that if they've got a sticky customer, how can you help them with that customer?
I think another thing that's sort of probably not the first thing you want to try, but if you really struggle to get the sales team on board or engaged, and you get a new salesperson, it's like an opportunity to get in there, from the start. Like they're a new person, they're usually hungry to meet people in the organization and get support and, and confirmation. And so sometimes I've, seen a couple of cases where that sort of was an opportunity for marketing to get closer to sales, just with that new person from day one, and just, you know, make it a but yeah, it's probably not where you want to start. Like, you probably want to try your existing salespeople first, but if that doesn't work, you know, why not try?
I mean, the other thing is there's nothing, if you have regular meetings with your sales and product and success people as a growth team, then actually having some brainstorms with them as to how you can get access to customer insights more. And sometimes the idea will actually come from one or two people within the team. I've often found that there's, as with everything, there's often somebody who's quite open and willing to go out with you, have you in the car with them, take them out for a ride. And then there are some people that are quite reticent and will be the last people. And so actually leaning into the people who are really open and helpful for you, and go with the willing to start off with, and then just tell stories back into the organization about the value that you got and the fabulous experience you had and the insights that you got, and start using the terminologies that you gathered during the time when you've been out with your salesperson. And bit by bit, hopefully you'll win over the rest of the team. But I've certainly found that's worked in the past as well. And then this last one is around kind of meetings here, and I've kind of just put it into a bucket of on its own. So this is really around you driving the meetings. So these can be formal or informal, kind of ad hoc. And by formal, I mean you arrange a meeting with a customer to discuss feedback from them and to actually do some market validation or some sense checking your customer persona messaging, or just to have a conversation with them around what it is that's going on in their world. And you can actually arrange an actual meeting on that. And when I say a formal, I mean that is the purpose of the meeting. Sometimes if you're out and about at events and seeing them at meetings or whatever, you can have an ad hoc conversation. And then sometimes you can do the beer. You know, do you fancy a catch up for a coffee, or a drink, or, you know, lunch or whatever, and have a conversation. The other one is actually pulling people together for a formal focus group. So I'd suggest you do that with at least two of you, because it's quite hard to corral a group of people on your own. And that might be an opportunity to do with your salesperson or somebody else in your organization as well. But actually bringing people together to get feedback with specific questions. And then the last one, which I think Lisa was mentioning, was this case study thing. I love doing case studies. You're there to write a case study. The customer already loves you, but at the same time, I always slip in other questions that are like, right, okay, now we've finished the case study, which of course is you want them to be telling you all the fantastic things about your organization. You then kind of go, right, okay, open book now. What's going on in your world? What don't you like about what we do? What are your key challenges at the moment? And you throw those questions in because you've already got that relationship with somebody. So it's kind of making the most of an opportunity, marginally cheeky, but I don't think there's any issue with that. And as long as you're mindful of time and ask permission for the customer. My observation is the fact, I think, again, going back probably to that nervousness about I'm asking for their time. So Franchelle had texted and said that they give away a gift voucher of, I think it was $25 for particular customer feedback. My experience is the fact that most people, when you ask them about their organization and themselves, will freely give you lots of time. I think it's you have to be mindful of people's time being busy. But if you're talking about something that is going to help you help them, many people will give time that is often quite surprising to me, but that they do. So I think sometimes the blocker is that we don't actually ask, rather than it's a real blocker that customers don't want to speak to us. I think there's clearly a difference between people who are customers already and those who may be prospects. But even so, often, if you're very clear of what you're wanting to achieve and why you've chosen them, my observation is that people will give you their time. And if that's a nice thing for you to do, is to give them a coffee voucher or a gift voucher or something afterwards, then I think that's a worthwhile investment for your organisation. Has anybody got anything else to add on this particular section?
I'd just add to that, Helen, the sneaky questions at the end, particularly, I'm the same as you, fractional CMO, we're seen as a bit independent. So we can sneak in a few extra questions. I use it to validate what they're doing, what they're reading, what events they're going to, are they on LinkedIn, those sort of things, which helps you work out where the rest of your prospects might be.
Yeah, great.
I think another really good tactic around meetings is a user group, and having, you know, an annual user group where you bring together. So outside of a focus group, but something that builds community within your customer base, I think is a really strong way for you to promote advocacy, but also to listen and have clients actually stand up and present how they're using your technology, or, you know, some of the benefits or the challenges, or, you know, trends in the industry, or whatever. Those user groups are really powerful to continue to build that community around your solution.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think that's such a good work. Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree. Because, like, I think the most valuable, like, you know, customer feedback, customer learning session I've ever been involved in was a focus group. And the reason it was so valuable is because the customers just started talking amongst them. And we didn't even really have to do anything. I mean, we started it off and asked a couple of questions, and then they just had a conversation. And so it was just people from, you know, related industries, or, you know, related types of businesses talking about, you know, their problems. And it was just so much more insightful than any kind of interview style, you know, conversation you could have had. And I think you might, you know, probably get the same with like user group, you know, things. So anything that gets your customers talking to each other, or your, you know, target audience talking to each other, and you can observe, I think is super valuable.
Yeah, another tactic similarly in prospect land, which I've used, which works really well, is having a facilitated roundtable lunch or breakfast. So you get like an industry expert not in your company, an industry expert or someone outside the company to come in and facilitate a Q&A around a table of, say, 10 to 12 of your target audience over a lunch or breakfast. And the insights that you get and the content you actually can take away with, assuming you're not under the Chatham House rules, or even if you are, you can anonymize it, of course. That's a really powerful strategy as well for prospects, especially if you have a customer or two sitting around the table.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome, and people love coming along and meeting their peers as well. So I think that's a really, really good way of doing it, because there's some value add there as well, because they'll get to learn from each other. So it's not so much we're trying to sell you something, it's more we're listening, but you've also got the opportunity to talk to others about how they address this issue in the marketplace as well.
Yeah, and there are some sort of event organizations that will do this on your behalf at an exorbitant fee. So if you have a good enough database and you have a strong enough network and you can pull it off yourself, then, you know, instead of paying $25,000, you can probably get away with $2,500 by doing it yourself. So it just depends on the strength of your network and your database.
Thank you. And then I've just kind of included a few tips and tricks here, and I'm sure again there's some more, but like one of the things I would say is, before you have conversations with clients, actually think about what you're actually trying to achieve and draft yourself some scripts and talking points. And also the idea of role playing. I think particularly when you're early on this journey, actually having a role play with one of your colleagues can be pretty helpful, because you find that your tongue gets all tied sometimes. Actually just running through what you might like to say and what you're actually meaning when you say something, I think can be really useful. And also watching other people. Sometimes I love just going out with other people who just know how to speak in a certain way, because you learn so much about how they articulate things. Then think about your systems and the technology and tools that you can use. So, I mean, I've just written down recording tools and taking notes. I mean, I'm a great fan of taking notes anyway, but even if you're recording something, taking a couple of notes can show that you're actually listening to key points. And I think that demonstrates to the customers or the prospects that you're listening. And then the other thing is, don't hold it all up in your head. Make use of your CRM as well, so that you can actually capture some of this information and feed it back and start seeing some of the trends as well. And then from your team, don't be afraid to kind of share back to your team what you've learned, what's gone well, what's not gone well, and learn on it, especially when you're on the early journey of doing this for an organization. Set yourself up to be, admit that this is early and you're going to be learning stuff, and actually reflect on that with the team. And then a couple of resources, and some of these are really, this one particularly is pretty old and you probably will have seen it more than once beforehand, but I would just reiterate it, is remembering that most of us, particularly in tech, particularly the tech people of tech companies, want to talk about the thing that they sell. And really what we're talking about here is listening to customers about what their challenges are and what they're trying to seek. So this is a really good thing to kind of keep us focused on why we're doing this and what we're actually trying to achieve. We're trying to understand what is it that the people are trying to get out of any solution. I don't really care whether you've got a purple widget with blue spots. It's really what the outcome is for them. This book for this kind of thing is one of my favorites. It's awesome, and I really recommend it, and you can get it as download as well as an audio book. But the idea is that your mum will always lie to you and say, yes, that's a great idea, and so do most of your friends and family when you first start asking them about it. So this is particularly aimed at product development early stages, but it's actually got some really good practical questions that you can ask for your customers and prospects. The idea being, talk about their life, not your idea. So ask them what's going on in their worlds. Ask for specifics from the past, not hypothetical futures. So would you buy this product? Isn't what you're asking them. You're saying, when did you last buy a piece of software? What did you use it for? And be really specific about what they've actually done in the past. And then the last key point of this is asking questions that even a no is useful, because I guess we don't like giving people a no answer. So you want to really get insights out of your conversations. You don't want to be getting people to feel uncomfortable about telling you, no, that isn't useful, or I would rather do it this way. So you need to frame your questions in a way that actually is quite okay for them to say it. And then, yeah, I guess just wrapping up and then going into more Q&As, but really I just think the key point here is we need to listen much more. We need to talk to our customers much more, but when I say talking to, I mean listening. And the last point there is about setting targets and getting accountable. It's one of these things that probably will be on your list of to-dos forever. So pick a number and hold yourselves to account. Tell somebody else that you're going to do it. But if your idea is that you're going to talk to 5 customers in the month, then write that up on the wall and make sure that somebody else knows that you're going to do it. Or if you've got colleagues that you're setting targets to and it's like 2 customers and the questions have got to be around X, Y, and Z, then I think that is probably the easiest way to start getting it happening within your organisation. And if that's doing one focus group in the next quarter, then set that target and make sure that you hold yourselves to account. Is there any other questions, comments, suggestions?
Just wanted to put in the plug as well for using external research agencies. There are a number of agencies that do specialize in doing customer insights interviews. And certainly in the companies that I work with, I've seen that be quite beneficial for providing that level of independence. I know it was talked about that the sales folks often bring a sort of sales lens that they bring to a meeting or a conversation, and equally the marketers bring a lens of just being employed by the company, whereas if you're employing an agency to do this work for you, they can be truly independent, and the customer will often feel free to make comments that they maybe would otherwise hold back a little bit, knowing that they're speaking to an employee of the company. So it can be very beneficial to have someone do that independently on your behalf and then report their insights back to the organization.
Yeah, and NZT is fantastic for providing support for that as well. Thanks, Shannon.
Yep.
I would say it's like eating an elephant, right? Like it's a super big thing. It's hard. It often just goes in the I'll deal with that later bucket. So I guess you just need to be really focused on one specific area that you want to find out on, like you want to find out information on, and have a plan of attack around how you do that so that you do actually do something rather than nothing. Because it can just get too hard.
Yeah, I think that's really true about kind of keeping focused on the one thing that you're actually trying to find out at the moment. A bit like writing a survey. You don't want to write a survey that's got 200 questions long just because everybody in the organisation wants to know that. You want to keep it really succinct.
Yeah, I think added to that, Helen, hi, it's Lucy. I think
Hey, Lucy.
yeah, I think perhaps taking it a step further and actually establishing and launching a voice of the customer program. So you've actually got something there that's visible and people are working to, and then added to a point around metrics, define those metrics and measure the improvement. But if you've actually got a program there rather than loosely just talking, we need to talk to our customers, it's going to be seen and recognised and measured.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely, and aligning it with your sales organization especially, because, you know, as we've talked about, they do own the customer relationship and ultimately they are our clients. So yeah, aligning the program, the voice of customer program with them is super important.
And action, it means they're all, they've got to act.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point too, and something that we haven't necessarily covered is do something with what you hear. Like there needs to be an action plan off the back of the feedback you hear. So for example, so many times I've seen the Net Promoter Score survey run and everybody pats themselves on the back and says, oh, we're positive X, Y, and Z, but we've also got this feedback and we haven't done anything with the feedback. Yeah. I think you need a plan of action before you start as to what are you going to do with what you hear. Is it going to influence the story you tell to market? Is it going to change how your senior executive might engage with the customer? Does it change how you might enable your sales team in the future? You know, there's definitely actions off the back of the feedback you hear.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Caro. So one last thing, getting ready for this, I penned all my thoughts and wrote them onto this ebook, which I was going to send round. I'd really appreciate any feedback and suggestions on that, because I think there's some tips in here that I haven't managed to cover today, but also there's some other stuff that we've brought out, which I think would be really useful to share with everybody as well. So I'm happy to share that with people. And hopefully there's some stuff in there that's helpful. And if you would like to get in contact with me, that's my contact details, and happy to answer any questions, provide feedback, or just say hi on LinkedIn. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Helen.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks. Great discussion for everybody as well. Thanks for the input.
Thank you.
Thanks. See you